Remain indoors. Remain indoors. Secure all entryways. Do not respond to any cries for help. Remain indoors. It will outrun your vehicle. Remain in.
Watch who's stalking who now. Who's stalking who now? Look at that. Do you see a person?
The video shows him walking through thick trees, the air quiet and still. But far in the background, something moves. A dark figure, hard to see at first. Every time he turns, it slips behind trees, silent, patient, almost like it's playing a game.
Yeah, who's stalking who now? I got you. Look at this beautiful moss, by the way. Do you hear it?
He tries to act normal, pointing out the moss, talking to himself, but his voice grows shaky. He knows he's not alone. He can feel it.
Okay, ready? Tell me I'm crazy. Tell me I'm crazy.
The deeper he goes, the more the feeling grows, like the woods themselves are closing in. He reaches a clearing and looks around. Nothing. But he's breathing heavily now. He keeps saying he's alone, trying to believe it. But behind the trees, that figure is still there.
Tell me I'm crazy. Look at that. I'm by myself. Ain't nothing. Look at that. Oh my God.
Yeah, we're going inside.
When you go poking around Appalachia in places you shouldn't, things like this happen. One of the most notoriously haunted locations in southern Ohio is Crybaby's Bridge. Legend has it, decades ago, a young mother with her baby was on the bridge when she either jumped or was hit and knocked off. The legend would also have you believe that this young mother and baby is still trapped here because you can hear the baby crying, as I'm going to show you. However, it's not a baby, it's not a young mother, it's something straight out of hell. Watch this video clip.
It's local around my area, and they say she got hit on the tracks with her baby, or her body was dumped right there in the creek. This place is spooky. Right. Oh, hell no. No. No.
This group of friends face a whistling, screaming demon in Appalachia territory, and it genuinely spooked me. Mark tells a story about the encounter his group had with this unknown humanoid figure that stood about 8 to 9 feet tall while camping on the Montour Trail, and Mark and his friends go to set up camp at the Boggs campsite. Most of the group members were ill-prepared. They mostly just brought recreational supplies, other than Mark. He brought like a couple blankets and was actually dressed warm. Because of this, Mark assumes that they're going to be standing by the fire all night, and he soon realizes that it will become his responsibility to go get the firewood most of the time. When they got there around 3 p.m., it wasn't too cold, but it was expected to get into the 40s that night. They spent several hours just eating, drinking, and enjoying some music, hanging out with each other. They were quickly burning through all the nearby woods, so Mark was having to go further and further out each time. At 12:30 a.m., Mark had to go so far that he was losing sight of camp, but being 6'5", he wasn't too worried about being alone in the woods. That's when he heard the first whistle. He said it sounded like someone breathing through a snorkel. At this point, he's just like,
Must have been the wind.
Between 1 and 2 a.m., the rain is replaced with snow, and so Mark is yet again out getting firewood. On his way back this time, the whistling is heard again, and it's even louder this time, and he's starting to really notice how weird it is. The wind hasn't picked up despite the whistling being louder, and he thinks that maybe it's just changed direction or something. He keeps walking until he's able to start hearing faint music coming from his camp. As Mark reaches the top of the hill, right before he goes down to the campsite, he hears loud noises echoing behind him. He assumes a tree fell or maybe a deer knocked something over, so he turns around, shines his flashlight everywhere, but he can't see anything that's happened, and nothing's fell, and he just doesn't know where it came from. He's back at camp now, so it doesn't really matter to him. He just forgets all about it. By 4:30 a.m., everyone's so cold that they all decide to go with him to gather some wood. They split up, naturally. Mark ended up further away from the camp than he originally intended to, looking for some wood that was not fast-burning pine. And the whistling starts again. This time he could tell it was coming from his left, so he turned his flashlight in that direction just to see what was there. Nothing was there. It stopped briefly, then picked up again, seeming like it was coming from a different direction this time. This time in front of him, and a little bit to his right. He's thinking maybe the wind is just catching in the branches just right to make this odd specific sound, so he tries to ignore it and goes back to doing what he's doing. As he's returning, the noises seem to follow him. They're coming from his left, his right, and seem to always be just behind him. He keeps turning his flashlight in all directions. He's still not seeing anything. He's thinking like, whatever. Then there was just one sharp whistle and it paused. That's when he heard it, a voice saying, "It's cold out here." Ugh. At this point, Mark is assuming it's his friend, specifically one that he calls R. Couldn't locate R with his flashlight, and he starts yelling out, like, "Where are you at?" Mark then hears a branch snap and notices some movement and thinks that R is now in a different location. Aims his flashlight, no sign of him. He thinks maybe he's hiding behind a bush or a tree. Mark calls out to him, "R," no response. He's thinking that maybe he's trying to scare him, but he's still worried that he might get lost on his way back to camp, so he goes, "I'm going back to camp." He shines his flashlight around one last time, and Mark sees something dart into the bushes about 40 feet from where he had heard what he thought was R. He yells, "I see you, big man, grab some wood and come back." He waits a few more seconds before he turns around and starts walking back. Suddenly, he's hearing whistling again. No matter how fast he moved, it seemed to always be right behind him. So he decides to sit under a tree and wait for R to return, thinking eventually he's gonna have to walk back past him. I'm guessing he's still assuming that the whistling is R. The whistling remained consistent, and it started to move in like an odd circular pattern around him. Appearing in one spot, then shifting to another. Mark is still thinking it's the wind because of the way it's moving around oddly. He's like, that's the only logical explanation. I'd be trying to tell myself that too, to be honest. He's still looking around for R, periodically turning on his flashlight, looking around, and he noticed that weirdly the whistling stops whenever he's looking around. For like a second or two, and it'd be eerily quiet. Gets up, brushes the dirt off, thinks, surely he's gonna be coming soon. He starts walking back towards the camp again, and that's when he notices something move out of the corner of his eye. Scanned the area, saw nothing. Took a few more steps, saw another flicker of movement. The whistling starts again. As the whistling keeps being accompanied with like brief movements in the bushes, like he starts to pick up his pace. First a speed walk, then a jog. He's thinking R is usually pretty sluggish, and he doesn't think that he'd be able to move that fast, so he gets pretty freaked and this time dives under a bush. Silence again. He's thinking, is there a coyote stalking me, maybe? His flashlight's off, so he's letting his eyes adjust. He tries to peek out from the bushes, and he hears persistent whistling again. He waited for a little while, and that's when he heard it speak, this time in a distorted imitation of his own voice, saying, "Big man." And that's when he decides that this is not human, this is not R, it's not good. Spoke again, mimicking when he was saying R, then it was abruptly cut off and went back to camp. It then repeats several phrases in different voices, discussing how cold it is, asking questions like, "What was that?" and "Stop fucking with me." And each voice that spoke sounded like it had something lodged in his throat. Mark slowly pokes his head out from underneath the bush, and that's when he sees something sitting against a tree, in the same position that he had been earlier. Its left leg was straight out, while its right leg is at an angle, and its hands are resting behind its head. And for a moment, it could have fooled him into thinking that it was actually R. That's when the figure began to whistle. The creature moves its hands in front of it, almost like Mark was doing with the flashlight, and then it starts to stand up. Mark describes, "Oh, it was tall. I only weighed 166 pounds and was mostly skin and bone, so when I noted that the thing was skinny, it was an exaggeration. I could see the thin, long, spindly arms were silhouetted against the snow, covering a nearby bush. When it stood, it hunched over. I wasn't sure if it had been slouching, but he certainly did slouch." The being walked a few paces away, and it stood completely up, and it was massive. Mark used to work with stage directions and stage walls that were like 8 feet tall, and he said it could clearly see over that, at least by a foot, so it's about 9 feet tall. It slowly peered around, and he could see that it had no hair and had a really disfigured skull. Its jaw hung down unnaturally and had very unpronounced lips, but it was still kind of hard to see it in the dark. Then it called out with a final garble, "R, big man." A sound that Mark says resembled someone in distress. Then it just starts screaming. Mark says that his dad used to take him to air shows a lot as a kid, and this scream reached a pitch and volume that was similar to an F-16 fighter jet. He's frozen in place while the figure continues just peering around, scanning the area. Then it crouches down and leaps onto a branch that's about 15 feet in the air. It just sits there squatting, whistling, and staring off into the distance. Suddenly, it took off, faster than anything ever could in nature. Mark counts to 10 in his head, the forest goes completely silent, and he finally makes a run for it, avoiding using his flashlight, and he's trying really hard not to make a sound. Before climbing down that hill back to camp, he takes one last look at the woods, and he's just not sure whether what he saw was real or just a figment of his imagination. He's finally back to the relative safety of the fire, where the other members of the group, Y and J, are just waiting for him. They ask him where his wood is, and he just kind of makes up some excuse about it having bugs in it. They're like, okay, whatever, and Mark asks, where's R? They go, check the tent, and he's in there, passed out, asleep, just dead asleep. Mark crawls into his sleeping bag to try and just forget everything and warm back up. And then he hears the scream again. He's thinking, please don't let it come here. And normally when this group would go out camping, Mark would tell them when they heard a noise, like what it was, and he's just silent. He asks if they heard the first scream, and they're like, yeah. They're like, did you see it? And he's like, yep. They're asking what it was. He has no clue. And then he quickly describes it to them so they could listen for any more noises. He's telling them about how it imitated his own voice. They're thinking maybe it's a truck on the highway or an owl, making up pretty much any excuse. Next morning, they went to a walk where Mark had saw the creature, and it hadn't snowed much the night before. The tree he had sat under had scratch marks all over it. The area where it was standing before it jumped on the branch had a ton of footprints on it that seemed to have no apparent, order to them. It looked like it had run over every square inch of that area, coming very, very close to where Mark had been hiding in that bush. Mark didn't really know anything about cryptids, so when he got home, he tried to research it. The closest he could come up to was a wendigo, but it didn't really have antlers, and it just looked very odd shaped in the skull. But that's pretty much the closest we can come to. So yeah, if you hear whistling while in the Appalachian woods, just leave.
If you live in the Appalachian Mountains, you know to never go outside at night. A man named Dustin from Gatlinburg, Tennessee was letting his dog use the bathroom late one night when he caught a creepy moment on video. As he was trying to bring his dog back inside, someone or something was out there talking to him.
Guys. Cherokee, Dewey, come on. A deep, mysterious voice from an unknown origin is heard talking to Dustin, saying, "I see you, and come here." And as Dustin makes his way into the safety of his home, whatever this was follows him and tries to break inside. Dustin says he locked his door and refused to look out the window, which is probably the best thing to do when you're living alone, deep in the Appalachian Mountains.
There it goes again. It's gonna be 4. And so it's like a really weird place to shoot. I think the trail goes that way. Maybe it's just me being paranoid, but I have like a weird feeling. Why the are you shooting right off trail? Only 4 shots. Maybe he only has a 4-shot gun. You can hear him moving. It's not. I'm just like sketched out, like a little weirded out.
Going out here by myself. Weird stuff out here. I've been hearing weird stuff out here, so. Yep. Yep, there it is. Time to go. Time to go. Time to go. Time to go.